She stood in front of a millionaire, holding nothing but a torn purse and a quiet prayer. "I have nowhere to sleep tonight," she said. He thought he had seen everything: power, betrayal, money, loss. But nothing prepared him for what came next. Because within hours, that same little girl would lead him to a truth he had buried for years. A truth that would destroy everything he thought he knew about his past, and rebuild his future in a way no one could have imagined. If stories about love, second chances, and the quiet power of faith touch your heart, consider subscribing. There are many more journeys like this waiting for you. Arthur Hale had built his life on control. At 33, he was the definition of success. A self-made millionaire, CEO of a rising corporate empire, owner of luxury cars, glass offices, and a penthouse that overlooked the glowing skyline of Savannah. People respected him, feared him, envied him. But no one truly knew him. Because behind the tailored suits and calculated decisions, Arthur carried a silence. A quiet emptiness that no amount of money had ever filled. That evening, he sat alone on an old iron bench in Forsyth Park, his phone glowing in his hand, his mind drowning in numbers, contracts, and quiet pressure. His driver waited somewhere nearby, his schedule packed, his life moving at full speed. And yet, for the first time in years, he had stopped. Maybe it was the way the sunlight hit the cobblestones. Maybe it was the distant laughter of strangers. Or maybe it was because something inside him felt tired. Then came a voice. Soft, fragile, almost lost in the noise of the evening. "Excuse me, sir. Do you know anyone who could help me?" Arthur looked up, and everything changed. Standing in front of him was a little girl, no more than 5 years old. Her floral dress was faded and worn, the colors nearly erased by time. Her hair was tangled, like no one had brushed it in days. Her small sandals barely held together. And in her arms, she clutched a small, old purse like it was the most important thing she owned. "I don't have anywhere to sleep tonight." Arthur stared at her. Not because he didn't understand what she said, but because he couldn't believe it. A child, alone, in a city like this. Something about her eyes stopped him. They weren't begging. They weren't afraid. They were calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that doesn't belong to a child. The kind that comes from seeing too much, too early. Arthur slowly slipped his phone into his jacket. For a moment, he forgot about business, about money, about everything that usually mattered. He stood up, then paused. No, that didn't feel right. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in years. He lowered himself, kneeling down so he could look her in the eyes. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked softly. The girl held his gaze without hesitation. "Lily." The name landed gently, but carried weight. "That's a beautiful name," he said. She nodded, serious. "My mama gave it to me." There was something in the way she said that. Something careful. Arthur felt it, but didn't push. "Are you hungry, Lily?" She looked down at her feet, then back at him, then gave a small, almost reluctant nod. That was enough. "Come on," Arthur said, extending his hand. "Let's get you something to eat." She didn't hesitate. She simply placed her tiny hand into his, and trusted him. 5 minutes later, they sat side by side on the same bench. Lily held a cup of lemonade in one hand and a warm pretzel in the other. She ate quietly, slowly, like she had learned not to waste anything. But what caught Arthur's attention wasn't how she ate. It was what she didn't let go of. That little purse. Even while eating, she held it tightly against her chest, like it meant everything. Arthur leaned slightly, curiosity creeping into his voice. "What do you keep in there, Lily?" "Something special." She paused, looked down. then carefully opened it. Inside, there wasn't money. Not toys. Not anything valuable by the world's standards. Just a small, worn blue Bible. A folded tissue. A faded photograph. And a crumpled piece of paper. "My mama said, if I keep this close," she whispered, touching the Bible, "God stays close to me too." Arthur didn't speak. For the first time in years, he didn't have an answer. He had spent his life chasing control, building wealth, solving problems. But this quiet, unshaken faith, in a child with nothing, it shook him. "Do you believe in God, mister?" Lily asked. Arthur froze. No boardroom had ever made him hesitate like this. He looked at her, really looked, and for once in his life, he didn't know what to say. So instead, he asked something else. "Where's your mother, Lily?" The girl lifted her small hand and pointed upward. "She's at the big hospital," she said. She fell, and then she stopped talking. Arthur's chest tightened. "How long have you been alone?" Lily didn't answer immediately. She just took another small bite of her pretzel. Like it was a normal question. Like it didn't matter. And that somehow made it worse. Before Arthur could speak again, a voice cut through the air. Panicked. Breathless. "Lily!" Arthur turned sharply. A woman rushed toward them, her face pale, her eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. And in that moment, Arthur had no idea that the truth about this little girl was about to reach far deeper into his own past than he was ready to face. "Lily!" The little girl turned her head calmly, as if she had been expecting that voice all along. The woman reached them, breath trembling, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red, swollen, filled with fear that hadn't yet settled. "Oh, my Lord! I found you," she whispered, dropping to her knees and pulling Lily close, pressing her lips against the child's dusty forehead. Arthur stood up immediately, his posture shifting, instinctively placing himself between them for a brief second. "Do you know her?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. The woman looked up at him, startled by his presence, then nodded quickly. Yes, I do. I'm her neighbor. I live next door to her mama," she said, trying to catch her breath. "My name is Clara." Arthur studied her face. There was no deception there, only worry and relief. "What happened?" he asked. Clara swallowed hard, her voice shaking. "Her mama, Mary, she had an accident 3 days ago. Fell hard while working. Hit her head on the floor. They took her to the hospital in an ambulance." She paused, her eyes filling again. "And that landlord we got, heartless man, he threw this child out the same night. Said no rent, no room." Arthur's jaw tightened. Clara continued, her voice cracking now. "I've been looking for her everywhere. Streets, shelters, parks, for 2 days straight. I knew she wouldn't go far. She's a good girl, always waits near where her mama used to take her." Arthur slowly turned his head and looked at Lily. She was standing quietly beside Clara, holding her purse again, like none of this chaos belonged to her. "How long has she been out here?" Arthur asked, his voice lower now. Clara hesitated. 2 nights. The words hung in the air like something heavy, something wrong. 2 nights. A 5-year-old child. Alone. Sleeping somewhere on cold concrete, with nothing but a torn purse and a small Bible. Arthur felt something shift inside his chest. Not a thought. Not logic. Something deeper. He looked at Lily again. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She was just there. Peaceful. Like she had accepted something no child should ever have to understand. Arthur exhaled slowly, then turned back to Clara. You can stop worrying, he said, his tone calm but decisive. I'll take her to the hospital right now. She needs to see her mother. Clara blinked, surprised. She looked at him carefully this time. Really looked. His suit. His posture. His calm authority. And then, doubt crept into her expression. You're a stranger, she said softly. I don't even know your name. Arthur didn't react. That's fair, he replied. My name is Arthur Hale. The name didn't mean much to Clara, but something about the way he said it, steady, grounded, made her pause. Still, she looked down at Lily, as if asking silently. And before Clara could say another word, Lily spoke. He's the one God sent. The words were simple, quiet, but they carried a certainty that made the moment still. Clara looked back at Arthur, then at Lily again. Something softened in her face. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was faith. Or maybe it was the way Lily said it, like it wasn't a guess. It was truth. Clara let out a long breath, then crouched down, brushing a strand of tangled hair from Lily's face. "All right, my sweet girl," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You go with him." She pressed another kiss to Lily's forehead, then stood up, looking directly into Arthur's eyes. "You take care of her," she said, firmer now. Arthur nodded once. "You have my word." Clara held his gaze for a moment longer, searching for something. Then she turned and walked away slowly, her shoulders heavy but her steps lighter than before. Arthur watched her disappear into the distance, then looked down at Lily. "Come on," he said gently. She placed her hand in his again, and together they began walking. As they moved toward the edge of the park, Arthur reached into his jacket, pulling out his phone. He needed to call his driver. Handle things. Fix this. That's what he always did. But just before dialing, he stopped. There was something he needed to know first. Something important. He looked down at Lily. "What's your mother's full name?" he asked. Lily didn't hesitate. "Mary Grace Fletcher." Arthur's entire body went still. The world didn't spin. It didn't shake. It just stopped. For a brief moment, even the noise of the park seemed to fade into nothing. Mary Grace Fletcher. The name echoed in his mind like something pulled from a place he had locked away years ago. His grip on the phone loosened slightly. His breath slowed. And for the first time since he met her, Arthur looked at Lily differently. Not just as a lost child, but as something closer. Something he couldn't explain yet. Lily tilted her head, studying his face. "My mama has a little mark here," she said softly, pointing to her own chin. Then she looked at him again. "Just like you." Arthur's heart skipped. A sharp, sudden beat that didn't feel normal. Didn't feel controlled. His fingers curled slightly as he slowly lowered his hand. Memories, ones he had buried, avoided, refused to revisit, began rising quietly to the surface. A small room. A shared hallway. A girl with a warm smile and tired eyes. Mary. Arthur blinked hard, trying to steady himself. No. It couldn't be. Not now. Not like this. But something deep inside him already knew. And as he stood there, frozen between the past and the present, his phone suddenly vibrated in his hand. The screen lit up. A name flashed across it. Ryan. Arthur stared at it for a second, then answered. "Yeah." The voice on the other end came fast. Urgent. Tight. "Arthur, listen to me carefully. We've got a serious problem." Arthur's eyes didn't leave Lily. "What is it?" There was a pause. Then Ryan said something that made Arthur's chest tighten all over again. "It's Ivy." Arthur turned slightly, taking a few steps away as he held the phone closer to his ear. "What about Ivy?" he asked, his voice low, controlled. On the other end, Ryan didn't hesitate. "She filed something this morning. Legal. Official," he said quickly. "Arthur, she's claiming you're mentally unstable. She's trying to take control of everything." Arthur's jaw tightened, but his expression didn't change. "She what?" "She's got a lawyer, a serious one. They're putting together documents to push you out of your own company. Assets, authority, everything. It's a full takeover attempt." Arthur closed his eyes for a brief second. Not shock, just confirmation. "I already saw it," he said quietly. Ryan paused. "Wait, you knew?" "This morning. Someone sent me everything. Contracts, messages, even the fake evaluations she's planning to use." There was a silence on the line. Then Ryan exhaled sharply. "So it's real." "It's real," Arthur replied. He opened his eyes slowly, looking ahead, but not really seeing anything in front of him. "Ivy's been planning this for months," Ryan continued. "She's trying to catch you off guard. If she gets those papers signed under pressure, it's over. She takes control." Arthur's grip on the phone tightened slightly. For years, he had trusted Ivy, brought her into his world, shared his life, his plans, his future. And all that time, she had been calculating, waiting, building a quiet betrayal behind a perfect smile. "Where are you right now?" Ryan asked. Arthur glanced down at Lily. She was standing still, holding her purse, watching him, her small face calm but observant. "I'm at the park," Arthur said. "Then don't stay there," Ryan snapped. "Go somewhere secure. We need to move fast. I'll call the legal team." Arthur ended the call. Just like that. No explanation. No urgency. The silence that followed felt different. Lily looked up at him. "Are you feeling bad, mister?" she asked softly. Arthur looked down at her. For a moment, he considered giving the usual answer. "I'm fine." The lie that always worked. But standing here, looking into the eyes of a child who had slept on the street and still held on to faith like it was something real, he couldn't say it. "Yeah," he admitted quietly. "A little." Lily nodded slowly, as if she understood more than she should. "Is it because of a bad person?" she asked. Arthur's lips parted slightly. He almost smiled. "Yeah," he said. "You could say that." She thought about that for a second. Then she stepped a little closer to him. "Do you want me to pray for you?" Arthur blinked. Of all the things she could have said, that wasn't what he expected. Not advice. Not questions. A prayer. From a child who had nothing. He looked at her, really looked at her. Her dress worn out. Her shoes barely holding. Her life uncertain. And still, she was offering something. Not asking. Offering. Arthur felt something in his chest shift again. Something unfamiliar. "Okay," he said softly. Lily's face lit up, not with excitement, but with quiet purpose. She closed her eyes, pressed her small hands together, and bowed her head. Arthur stood still. For the first time in years, he didn't move, didn't think ahead, didn't calculate. He just listened. "Dear Lord," Lily began, her voice gentle and clear, "you already know everything. You can see that this nice man is having a hard day." Arthur swallowed. "Please take care of him," she continued. "And please take care of my mama at the hospital. And thank you for the food." There was a small pause. Then, "Amen." The words settled into the air like something warm. Arthur didn't move right away. His eyes stayed closed for a second longer than hers. And in that quiet moment, Something inside him loosened. Not fixed, not healed, but softened. When he opened his eyes, Lily was looking at him again. "You feel better?" she asked. Arthur let out a slow breath. "Yeah," he said. "I think I do." And for the first time that day, he meant it. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he made a decision. "All right," he said, his tone steady now. "We're going to the hospital." Lily nodded immediately, like she had been waiting for that. Arthur reached down and took her hand again, guiding her forward. As they walked out of the park, the city noise slowly grew louder again. Cars passing. People talking. Life moving forward like nothing had changed. But for Arthur, everything had. He led her toward the street where his black sedan was waiting. The driver stepped out as soon as he saw them, opening the door without a word. But even he couldn't hide the brief confusion in his eyes at the sight of the little girl. Arthur didn't explain. "Hospital," he said simply. They got inside. Lily sat beside him, her small hands resting in her lap, her purse still held close. The car pulled away smoothly. For a while, neither of them spoke. The city lights began to flicker on as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the streets. Arthur leaned back slightly, staring ahead, but his mind was far from the road. Mary Grace Fletcher. The name kept echoing. Memories he had buried deep, pushing their way back to the surface. A narrow hallway. A shared laugh. A promise he never kept. He clenched his jaw slightly. 5 years. 5 years of building everything he thought mattered. And now, all of it felt distant. Almost meaningless. Beside him, Lily shifted slightly. "Mister," she said. Arthur turned his head. "Yeah." She hesitated, then asked softly, "Are you the person God sent to help us?" The question hung in the air. Simple, but heavy. Arthur looked at her. Really looked. At her eyes. At her quiet strength. At the strange, unexplainable pull he felt every time she spoke. He didn't have an answer. Not yet. So instead, he reached over and gently placed his hand over hers. "I'm going to try," he said. Lily studied his face for a second. Then she nodded, as if that was enough. The car continued moving through the city, getting closer to the hospital with every passing second. And Arthur had no idea that the moment he walked through those hospital doors, everything he thought he understood about his life was about to be completely rewritten. The car came to a smooth stop. Arthur didn't move right away. For a second, he just sat there, his hand still resting lightly over Lily's. The hospital stood in front of them, tall and quiet, its glass doors reflecting the fading evening light. People walked in and out, carrying worry, hope, and sometimes grief. "Are we here?" Lily asked softly. Arthur nodded. "Yeah, we're here." He stepped out first, then turned and helped her down carefully. Her small feet touched the ground, and she looked up at the building like it was something important, something sacred. Without saying anything, she reached for his hand again. Arthur didn't hesitate this time. He held it firmly. Together, they walked inside. The moment they entered, the air changed. Clean. Cold. Controlled. The quiet hum of machines, soft footsteps, distant voices. Everything felt precise, like life itself was being measured in careful seconds. They approached the reception desk. The nurse behind it looked up and paused. Her eyes moved from Arthur's tailored suit down to Lily's worn dress, then back to Arthur again. It didn't make sense to her. But Arthur didn't give her time to question it. "I need information on a patient," he said calmly. "Mary Grace Fletcher." The nurse typed quickly, her fingers tapping across the keyboard. There was a short pause. Then her expression shifted slightly. "She's in critical care," the nurse said. "Second floor." Arthur nodded. "I want to see her." The nurse hesitated. "Are you immediate family?" Arthur didn't answer that directly. "I'm someone who needs to be there," he said, his voice steady but carrying weight. The nurse studied him for a second, then glanced at Lily, who was standing quietly beside him, clutching her purse. Something in that small image softened her. She picked up a phone, spoke briefly, then nodded. "You can go up," she said. "Room 214. Arthur didn't waste another second. They moved quickly toward the elevator. Inside, the doors closed with a soft sound. Silence filled the space. Lily looked up at him. "My mama is strong," she said gently. "She told me that God watches over people in hospitals." Arthur swallowed. "I'm sure she is," he replied. But his voice carried uncertainty. The elevator doors opened. The second floor was quieter, more serious. The kind of place where people didn't talk much, because words didn't always help. They stepped out. A doctor was standing near the hallway, reading something on a tablet. She looked up as they approached. Arthur stopped in front of her. "I'm here for Mary Grace Fletcher," he said. The doctor nodded slowly. "I'm overseeing her care," she replied. "And you are?" Arthur hesitated for the briefest moment. "Then, a close friend," he said. The doctor studied his face, then glanced at Lily. Understanding passed through her eyes. "She's stable," the doctor said carefully. "But she hasn't regained consciousness yet. The injury was serious." Lily's grip on Arthur's hand tightened. "Can I see her?" she whispered. The doctor softened. "Yes, you can." She stepped aside, gesturing toward a door down the hall. Arthur and Lily walked toward it. Each step felt heavier than the last. When they reached the door, Arthur paused. Just for a moment. Then he pushed it open. The room was dim. Quiet. Machines hummed softly, their steady rhythm filling the silence. And there she was, Mary, lying still in the bed, her face pale, her head wrapped in bandages. So different from the girl he remembered, and yet the same. Time hadn't erased her. It had just changed her. Lily slowly let go of Arthur's hand and walked forward. Her small steps were careful, almost reverent. She reached the bed, stretched up slightly, and gently placed her tiny hand over her mother's. "Mama," she whispered. No response. But Lily didn't seem afraid. "I'm here," she said softly. "You don't have to worry any more." Arthur stood near the door, frozen, watching, listening, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Regret. Deep, heavy, unavoidable. He took a slow step forward, then another, until he stood on the other side of the bed, close enough to see her clearly, close enough to remember everything. Her smile, her voice, the way she used to look at him like he mattered, and the way he left, without looking back. Arthur's chest tightened. 5 years. 5 years she had lived without him. 5 years raising a child. Alone. He clenched his hands slightly, trying to steady himself. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and took out a card. Black, heavy, limitless. He turned to the doctor, who had quietly stepped into the room behind them. "Whatever she needs," Arthur said, placing the card into her hand. "Every treatment, every test, every minute of care, you put it on this." The doctor blinked, surprised. "This is—" "There's no limit," Arthur cut in gently. "Just take care of her." The doctor looked at the card, then at Arthur. She understood. "All right," she said quietly. Arthur nodded. then turned his attention back to Mary. But before he could take another step, his phone vibrated again. He ignored it, but it kept ringing. Persistent. He glanced at the screen. Ryan. Arthur exhaled slowly, then answered. What now? Ryan didn't waste time. She's on the move, he said. Ivy knows something's wrong. She tracked your car. Arthur, she's heading your way. Arthur's eyes shifted slightly. Where? The hospital. Arthur went still. Ryan's voice dropped. She's coming there right now, and she's not coming alone. Arthur slowly lowered the phone. His gaze moved toward the door, then back to Lily, still holding her mother's hand. And in that quiet room, filled with fragile hope, a storm was already on its way. Arthur ended the call without another word. The silence in the room returned, but it no longer felt calm. It felt fragile, like something was about to break. He slipped the phone back into his pocket slowly, his eyes drifting once more to Lily. She was still standing by the bed, her small fingers wrapped around her mother's hand, her head slightly bowed like she was listening for something no one else could hear. Arthur took a step closer. You okay? He asked softly. Lily nodded, not looking away from Mary. She can hear me, she whispered, even if she's sleeping. Arthur didn't argue. He didn't have the heart to. Instead, he looked at Mary again, really looked this time. The years hadn't been kind to her. There were faint lines on her face, the kind that came from long days and longer nights. Hard work, worry, survival. Not the kind of life he had promised her. Not the kind of life she deserved. Arthur swallowed, a quiet weight settling deeper into his chest. Before he could say anything else, footsteps echoed from the hallway. Sharp, confident, fast. Arthur turned his head slightly. He didn't need to see her yet. He already knew. The door pushed open. Ivy stepped inside like she owned the place. Tall, elegant, perfectly put together. Her presence carried the same polished confidence she wore at high-end events, the same calculated calm she used in boardrooms. But her eyes, they weren't calm. They were sharp, searching, irritated. Behind her stood a man in a dark suit, holding a leather briefcase tight against his side. Ivy's gaze moved quickly across the room, then landed on Arthur, and then it dropped to Lily. For a brief moment, something like disgust flickered across her face. "What is this?" she asked, her voice low but cold. Arthur didn't respond immediately. He stepped slightly closer to Lily, placing himself between her and Ivy without making it obvious. "I could ask you the same thing," he replied calmly. Ivy crossed her arms, her expression tightening. "Don't play games with me, Arthur," she said. "We need to talk. Now." Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, then back to him. "Alone." Arthur shook his head slightly. "No." The answer was simple, final. Ivy blinked, clearly not expecting that. "This isn't optional," she said, her voice sharpening. "If you don't handle this tonight, you're going to lose everything by morning." Arthur let out a quiet breath. 4 years, that kind of pressure would have worked. That tone. That urgency. But not anymore. "Lower your voice," he said, his tone steady but firm. "She's sleeping." Ivy's eyes snapped toward Mary, then back to Lily, then back to Arthur. "Who is she?" Ivy asked, her voice now carrying a thin edge of irritation. Arthur didn't answer. He didn't need to. Ivy's patience snapped. "Arthur, I am not standing here while you play house with some random." "Careful," Arthur cut in quietly. There was something in his voice now. Something colder. Something Ivy hadn't heard before. She stopped. Just for a second. Arthur finally looked directly at her. "I know what you did," he said. The room went still. Ivy's expression didn't collapse. Not immediately. She held it together, forcing a small, controlled smile. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she replied. Arthur stepped forward slightly. Slow. Measured. "You went to the courthouse this morning," he continued. "Filed documents claiming I'm mentally unstable. Tried to push a legal takeover of my company." The man behind Ivy shifted uncomfortably. Ivy didn't move. But her eyes. They changed. Just a little. "You're making assumptions," she said carefully. Arthur almost smiled. "No," he said. "I'm stating facts." He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. "I have everything," he added. "Messages. Payments. The fake witness you hired. All of it." The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Ivy's composure didn't shatter. It slipped. Just slightly. Enough to see what was underneath. Calculation. Fear. Anger. "You don't understand how this works," she said, her voice lower now. "You think this is about you? This is business." Arthur shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "This is betrayal." The word landed hard. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ivy exhaled sharply, her frustration breaking through. "Fine," she said. "Let's drop the act. Sign the papers, Arthur. Walk away clean. You still keep a portion. You still walk out rich." Arthur stared at her, unmoving. "And if I don't?" Ivy's expression hardened. "Then tomorrow morning you're finished," she said. "Your board turns on you. Your assets get frozen. Your name, everything you built, it's gone." Arthur let the words settle. 5 years of work. 5 years of sacrifice. Everything he had built from nothing. Hanging in the balance. And yet, he didn't feel fear. Not like he used to. Because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about money. He wasn't thinking about power. He was thinking about the little girl standing just a few feet away. The one who had nothing and still chose faith. Arthur looked at Ivy one last time. "Walk away," he said quietly. Ivy blinked. "What?" "Walk away," he repeated. "Leave now. And don't come back." There was no anger in his voice. No shouting. Just certainty. Ivy stared at him like she didn't recognize him anymore. "This is a mistake," she said. Arthur didn't respond. Behind him, Lily shifted slightly. And in the silence that followed, she spoke. Soft. Clear. "I'm not from the streets," she said. Ivy turned her head sharply. Lily looked straight at her. "I belong to the Lord." The words were simple, but they carried something. Unshakable. For a brief second, no one moved. Not Arthur. Not Ivy. Not even the man behind her. And then, from the bed, a sound. Faint. Weak. But real. Arthur's head snapped toward Mary. Lily's eyes widened. "Mama?" she whispered. The machines beside the bed shifted their rhythm slightly. And Mary's fingers, barely, moved. Arthur stepped forward instantly. "Doctor!" he called out, his voice sharp now, breaking the stillness. Lily leaned closer to the bed, her small hands tightening around her mother's fingers. "Mama!" "I'm here," she whispered again, her voice trembling just slightly for the first time. Mary's eyelids fluttered. Slow. Heavy. Like she was fighting through something deep and distant. The machines beside her gave a soft, steady rhythm, but there was a change now, a subtle shift that made everything feel different. Alive. The doctor rushed into the room, moving quickly to Mary's side. Her hands moved with trained precision, checking vitals, watching the monitors. "She's responding," the doctor said under her breath. Arthur stood frozen beside the bed. Ivy hadn't moved. Neither had the man behind her. For a moment, everything else, money, betrayal, power, faded into the background. Because this was real. Mary's lips parted slightly. A faint breath escaped. Then slowly, her eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, clouded with confusion, searching without understanding. Lily gasped softly, "Mama!" Mary's gaze shifted. It found Lily first. And something inside her changed. Recognition. Emotion. Her lips trembled. "Lily," she whispered, her voice dry, fragile. Lily broke. Tears filled her eyes instantly as she leaned closer. "I'm here, Mama. I'm right here," she said, her voice small but full of relief. Mary's fingers moved again, this time stronger, curling slightly around Lily's hand. Arthur felt his chest tighten. It was a simple moment. A mother and her child. But it carried a weight he couldn't ignore. Mary blinked slowly, her vision clearing bit by bit. And then, her eyes moved. Past Lily. To the other side of the bed. To him. Arthur. She stared. At first, it didn't register. Just another face. Another presence. But then, something shifted. Her breath caught. Her eyes widened. And suddenly, she knew. "Arthur," she whispered. The name fell from her lips like something pulled from a place she had held onto for years. Arthur didn't move. He couldn't. All the control he had built, all the walls he had constructed around himself, none of it mattered in that moment. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It's me." Mary's eyes filled with tears instantly. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just deep. Heavy. The kind that carried years inside them. "I thought," she started, her voice breaking, "I thought I'd never see you again." Arthur swallowed hard. "I know," he said. And for a moment, there was nothing else. No explanations. No questions. Just two people, standing in the same space again after 5 years of silence. Lily looked between them, her small face full of confusion. "Mama, you know him?" she asked softly. Mary didn't look away from Arthur. "Yes," she whispered. "I know him." Arthur felt something twist inside him. Something he had avoided for too long. Mary took a slow breath, her strength still fragile, her voice unsteady. "There's something you need to know," she said, her eyes never leaving his. Arthur shook his head slightly. "Mary, you just woke up. You don't have to." "Yes," she insisted softly. "I do." There was urgency in her voice now. Not panic. Not fear. Something else. Truth. Arthur went still. Lily looked up at him, then back at her mother. Mary tightened her grip on Lily's hand. Then she looked at Arthur, and said the words that changed everything. "Lily is your daughter." The room went silent. Not just quiet. Silent. Like the world itself had stopped to listen. Arthur didn't react right away. His mind didn't catch up. The words echoed, but didn't settle. "What?" he said softly, almost under his breath. Mary's tears slipped down her cheeks. "I found out after you left," she said. "A few weeks later. I tried to reach you. I really did. But your number was gone. You were gone." Arthur felt his chest tighten painfully. "I didn't know where you were. I didn't know how to find you," she continued. "So I just kept going. For her." Lily looked between them again, her small brows pulling together. "Mama, what does that mean?" she asked. Mary closed her eyes for a second, steadying herself. Then she opened them again. "It means," she whispered, "he's your daddy." Lily went still. Completely still. Arthur's knees weakened slightly, like the ground beneath him had shifted. He looked at Lily. Really looked. Her eyes. Her features. The small details he hadn't paid attention to before. And suddenly, they weren't small anymore. They were familiar. Painfully familiar. A reflection. His reflection. 5 years. 5 years of living his life, building everything he thought mattered, while his own daughter slept on the streets. Arthur felt his throat tighten. He couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think straight. All he could see was her, Lily, standing there, quiet, watching him, trying to understand. "Are you my daddy?" she asked softly. Arthur's legs gave out. He dropped to his knees in front of her, not because he chose to, because he couldn't stand any more. His eyes filled. Not controlled. Not hidden. Real. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking. "Yeah, I am." Lily stared at him, studying him, the way only a child could. Honest. Unfiltered. Then she crossed her small arms, just slightly, thinking, taking her time. And in that moment, Arthur felt something he had never felt in any boardroom, any deal, any moment of his life. Fear. Not of losing money, not of losing power, but of losing her. Lily tilted her head a little, then said quietly, "Okay." Arthur blinked. "What?" "You can be my daddy," she said simply. And just like that, something inside him broke, and began to heal at the same time. But before he could say another word, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed again from the hallway. Different this time. Urgent. The doctor turned toward the door, and Arthur slowly rose to his feet, his heart still racing, because deep down, he knew this moment of peace was about to be tested. The footsteps stopped at the doorway. Arthur turned. Ivy stood there again, but this time she wasn't composed. The calm mask she wore earlier had cracked. Her breathing was uneven, her eyes sharp with desperation rather than control. Behind her, the man with the briefcase looked uneasy now, shifting his weight like he already knew how this would end. "You don't get to just walk away from this," Ivy said, her voice tight, trying to hold on to authority that was slipping through her fingers. "Arthur, this isn't over." Arthur didn't respond immediately. He looked at Lily, then at Mary, then back at Ivy, and something in him settled. Not anger, not fear, clarity. "It is over," he said quietly. Ivy let out a sharp laugh, but it didn't carry confidence anymore. "You think this changes anything?" she snapped. "You think a situation like this," she gestured toward Lily with clear disdain, "means you can just ignore what's coming?" Arthur took a slow step forward. "You already lost," he said. Ivy's expression flickered. "No, I didn't." Arthur's gaze hardened. "You used a fake medical witness. You moved money through accounts you thought I wouldn't check. You built a case on lies." The man behind her lowered his eyes. Arthur continued, his voice calm but cutting through the room. "I have proof of all of it. If I make one call, this doesn't end in a boardroom for you. It ends in a courtroom." The silence that followed wasn't tense anymore. It was final. Ivy's shoulders stiffened. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. For the first time, she had nothing left to say. Arthur didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply looked at her and said, "Walk away, while you still can." The weight of those words landed, heavy, Unavoidable. Ivy's eyes moved briefly to Lily, then to Mary, then back to Arthur. And whatever fight was left in her faded. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like something collapsing from the inside. She turned, without another word, and walked out. The man followed quickly behind her, the briefcase now hanging useless at his side. The door closed, and just like that, the storm passed. The room fell into a deep, quiet stillness. Arthur stood there for a moment, letting it settle. Then slowly, he turned back. Lily was still watching him. Mary's eyes were still filled with tears. But now, there was something else in the room. Relief. Arthur walked back to the bed, his steps slower this time. More certain. He looked at Mary. "I should have come back," he said, his voice low. "I should have looked for you." Mary shook her head gently. "We both did what we could," she replied softly. "Life just didn't make it easy." Arthur swallowed. "No," he said. "I made it harder." There was no excuse in his voice. No defense. Just truth. Mary studied his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached her free hand toward him. Arthur hesitated, just for a second. Then he took it. Her grip was weak, but it was real. "You're here now," she said. And in those simple words, there was forgiveness. Arthur felt it, not as something loud, but something quiet, something that gave him space to breathe again. Lily looked between them, then smiled softly. "See," she said. "God fixed everything." Arthur let out a small breath that almost turned into a laugh. Not because it was funny, but because she believed it. And somehow, he was starting to believe it too. Days passed. Slowly, carefully. Mary grew stronger with each morning. The color returned to her face. Her voice steadied. The doctors smiled a little more each time they walked into the room. Arthur stayed. Not because he had to. Because he wanted to. He handled the legal mess quietly, efficiently. Ivy disappeared from his life like she had never been there. The company remained his, but for once it didn't feel like the center of his world. Because every evening, he sat beside Lily, listening to her stories, watching her laugh, learning how to be something he had never prepared for. A father. 2 weeks later, the hospital doors opened again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't uncertain. Arthur stepped outside, the sunlight warm against his face. Lily was in his arms, holding onto him like she belonged there. Mary walked beside them, leaning slightly against his shoulder, her steps slow but steady. Together. Not broken. Not lost. Together. Arthur looked down at Lily, at her small hands, at the quiet strength she carried. And in that moment, he understood something that no amount of success had ever taught him. The emotional peak of his life wasn't when he became rich. It was the moment he realized he had almost lost everything that truly mattered. He tightened his hold on her slightly, not out of fear, but out of gratitude, because life had given him something rare, a second chance. And this time, he wasn't going to walk away. As they stood there under the open sky, Arthur finally felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. Not the kind you buy. The kind you earn. Through love. Through sacrifice. Through choosing people over pride. And sometimes, the smallest voice in the world carries the greatest truth. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing, and tell me in the comments, which part of the world are you watching from?